Doctors see something coming out of the baby's neck, and when they find out what it is, it leaves them in awe. Mom's horror: my little son was born with a football-sized sack under his arm. I was afraid I'd love him if he died. Mom revealed how her baby was born with a football-sized sack under his arm, whose tip was left at a 90-degree angle. His mother, Cristina DiMartino, 34, was told that her unborn son, Matteo, had an abnormally large mass located across his chest and left arm, which covered up to 50% of his body, after a routine checkup at week 13. Matthew was born with a football-sized sack under his arm. The baby was found to have a rare lymphatic malformation, and medics warned he had only a 9% chance of being born. First-time parents Cristina and her husband Franco, 36, an electrician who works on the Long Island Railroad, in the U.S., decided not to terminate the pregnancy, but to give their little one a chance, and their son was born in an emergency C, at 7:17 p.m. on April 17, 2019. Matthew tipped the scales at 9 pounds 3 ounces, but he believes 3 pounds of that, a third of his body weight, is due to the huge bag that covered his side to his armpit. It meant that the newborn had difficulty moving his neck and head, was unable to roll over, sit in a car seat or baby clothes, and also left him with frequent skin infections. Franco and Cristina DiMartino decided to keep his son Matteo after warnings from doctors for a checkup for 13 weeks. Matthew was 6 months old in October last year and had surgery by a team of specialists at New York's Cohen Children's Medical Center to remove the cyst. He is now a happy 10-month-old baby with a bright future, but will need to be monitored as he gets older. Cristina, a special education science teacher from Long Island, said, "We are very proud of Matthew and everything he has been through. He defied all odds not only to survive but to thrive. We knew he was going to be born with a huge cyst, but we were also surprised when we first saw it." Specialists told parents for the first time that the chance of his birth was lower. Despite all the treatments and operations he has undergone, Matthew is a very happy child. Now he meets and exceeds milestones in his age. Now he pulls himself up to stand, crawls, eats foods with his fingers and says, "Mama, we can't love him anymore if we try." He was disabled. It was definitely the worst day of our lives. I felt like I was going to have a nervous breakdown. Cristina and Franco were about to find out that they were expecting a child after trying to start a family for so long. I found out I was pregnant a couple of days before Franco got a new job, so it all seemed like it was meant to be, she said. However, Matteo was born in April 2019. But the couple's jubilant bubble burst at the 13.5 weeks when Cristina and Franco were told their baby had a cystic malignancy during a routine checkup. She said, "I thought, kiss. How bad is the cyst? Think the child will have to remove it. But the doctor told me it was more complicated than that and showed me the examination. The cyst was already the size of a baby's head at this point, at 13.5 weeks. It was located under his left arm, in the armpit area." The parents were still in shock when they met their newborn for the first time. She said there was only a 9% chance that she would have the baby, and there was a 75% chance that it was a chromosomal disorder. It was disabling. It was definitely the worst day of our lives, and it was very hard trying to calm down and not put pressure on the baby. I felt like I was going to have a nervous breakdown. We knew how hard it was to get pregnant, so we decided to stick with it because we would deal with whatever plan God had put in place for us. They had to create special clothes for their little ones. The doctor then presented me with my options of having a chorionic villus sampling, which would involve inserting a needle into the placenta to collect fluid that would diagnose a chromosomal abnormality. Cristina had 2 tests for chromosomal disorders, both of which came back negative within a month. It was a good feeling, she said. With all these results, I knew that he had a good chance of a healthy birth. But researching their son's condition has left Cristina and Franco feeling worse. She said, "I felt bad seeing all the stats. He was exhausted to say the least. I had a week of excitement from my pregnancy, and that lasted until the birth. It was sad. I really felt sorry for myself." Cristina had regular hospital appointments, weekly at first, up to 3 times a week out of 32 weeks. Matthew was in and out of hospital due to repeated injuries. She said, "The cyst was constantly growing, and it started growing faster than it was in the size of his chest. His arm was now also stuck at a 90-degree angle inside the womb. Although every test worked out in our favor, even a heart scan showed no defects that surprised us all. In October, he had an operation to remove the cyst. Christina was then told that she would need to have an emergency cesarean section. She said, "I went to the hospital and assumed it was just for observation, but the doctor told me I was going to put the baby in that day because he thought he might have seen a little fluid in the baby's cheeks. And they turned out to be chubby cheeks. He drained 500 milliliters of cyst fluid after the lumbar puncture to make sure it fit in my stomach. After that Mateo was born, we gave him that name because it means God's gift. I couldn't hold my baby. They immediately took him out for assessment and I could only see a glimpse of his little face on his way out the door." Christina said she had to hold her baby like a spoon. He was breathing on his own and surprised the doctors that he didn't need medical intervention. They were staffed with 24 nurses and doctors in the delivery room. Despite knowing their little one has a huge cyst, Christina and Franco are still shocked when they see their newborn for the first time. Christina said, "One thing we weren't able to prepare for was the open lesion in Matthew's cyst. No one can tell how it happened. Matthew underwent chemotherapy to reduce the cyst size before surgery. He had deep, tight wrinkles, all over the sac as well, like weird brain-like skin. He was huge. His arm was high and not very mobile. I was scared to say the least. It was a shock to see the cyst in real life and it was much bigger than the scans showed. It was like there were two chests attached to each other." Matthew was kept in the neonatal intensive care unit for 2 weeks, before he was allowed to go home. Christina said, "I didn't know what to do when it was time to leave the hospital. I had to hold my baby differently than most mums, like a spoon. He is now a happy 11-month-old. The clothes didn't fit him. He had to eat from certain angles to make sure the weight of the sack wouldn't block his airway and I was scared. I was honestly scared of Mateo's love. I didn't know at that point how serious it was or if this was life-threatening. I felt guilty. It was the most terrifying feeling ever. Before long, his pretty face made me give in and my love grew. However, Matthew developed cellulitis and severe infections." Christina explained, "He's been hospitalized a few times and sometimes we've been there for weeks at a time. However, it is likely that he will need operations in the future. During these bouts of infection, he will be on strong intravenous antibiotics and a PICC catheter will be in place." The first and longest visit to the hospital was when he was only a month and a half old. During this residency, the vascular specialist strongly recommended that we start some form of chemotherapy. After seeing how his entire body swelled up and activating new cyst areas, we decided it was worth a try. It definitely ended up helping shrink the cyst, which led to the surgery. Parents grateful to their medical team. But before the surgery, Matthew's cyst was so large that it prevented him from wearing normal clothes. Many of them had to be changed. Christina said, "He had been dressing for 6 months since he was born. He couldn't sit without the support of the sack. He couldn't be carried normally. His arm had very limited range of motion. His head remained rotated in one direction because of his arm. His balance was completely off. His rolling and sitting were delayed until after the surgery. There was no way he could crawl if it wasn't for us. I was genuinely horrified by Mateo's love. I didn't know if his condition would threaten his life." Christina Di Martino, 34. At 6 months old, Matthew had his first surgery in 8 hours. They were also able to remove all the wrinkled skin and open the lesion, along with the left nipple that was there, Christina said. "We would expect the sac to be 3 pounds higher at birth, a third of its total weight. The cyst was a lot smaller when I removed it, because of the medication Mateo used. It was also drying out a lot in the house and would leak liters of lymph throughout my house. It was a shock to see the cyst in real life and it was much larger than the scans showed. It was as if there were two chests connected to each other." Christina Di Martino, 34. 3 months later, Matthew's scars began to heal and fade. Christina said, "I think the surgery was worse for Franco and I actually. He was out of it mostly for the first 2 days after surgery and then on the 3rd day he woke up smiling and his usual self. We noticed such a difference in our baby. He was sitting up and holding his body a few days after we got home. It was very touching for us. One day after his last bank came out, he was rolling back and forth. He was happier than usual and that made us realize how uncomfortable he really was. Now, at 10 months old, he is meeting Matthew and going beyond his major milestones. He receives physical therapy 3 times a week and his little arm is fully functional. He also has no infection since surgery. He receives a monthly injection, but most of his blood tests are now within the normal range. Matteo still has other growths on his body, with his mum admitting, they may need to be removed, but it's likely they will return, possibly with a vengeance. Of the future, she added, we just don't want him to get made fun of because he has lumps or a big arm, we don't want him to have a complex, we don't want him to have any limitations, it's hard to think about all the what-ifs.